Astronauts report a field course, T-minus 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Beyond the Launch, the podcast that explores what really happens after the deal is signed and the product goes live. Because real impact doesn't come from implementation alone. It comes from intentional, strategic customer success. Hosted by Ivan Whitaker, an experienced executive in sales, customer success, and implementations, including complex 911 and public safety implementations. This podcast goes beyond the launch to uncover what truly takes drive, adoption, measurable outcomes, and long-term success.
Welcome to Beyond the Launch from the Utah Podcast Studio. This is the show where we discuss the tech implementation challenges that no one put in the pitch deck. Today's guest has been one of those people, and now she is doing something about it. Tipi Brookens spent 24 years inside of emergency communications, starting as a 911 call taker, working her way through the ranks, and eventually becoming Chief of Professional Standards and Development and Chief of Staff at Washington, D.C.'s Office of Unified Communication. If you know anything about that agency, you know it is one of the most publicized, scrutinized 911 centers in the country. It operates under a level of media attention and community accountability that would break most organizations. TP not only worked inside it, she led it. Here is what I want you to understand about why she is on the show. TP made a choice that few people in her position ever make. After building something real inside a government agency, after earning every bit of credibility the hard way, she crossed the line. She left the agency world and joined Govworx as a Chief of Public Safety Engagement. And she did it because she believed the most impactful thing she could do for the 911 community was from the outside. This episode is titled From the Headset to the Boardroom, How Lived Experience Drives Meaningful Technology Adoption in 911. TP, welcome to Beyond the Launch.
Thank you so much, Ivan, for having me. I'm excited.
You know, TP, I've actually watched you from afar for a long time now and marvel at all of the things that you're doing. I've actually been inside of UC, and it's just a phenomenal dispatch center, and you all have done years and years of great work there. So I'm so happy to have you on the show to be able to share your expertise and experience.
I'm excited to be here to join this conversation. Thank you so much again for having me, Ivan.
Absolutely. So everyone that joins the show, TP, we start off with a couple of icebreaker questions so the audience can get to know you better. There's no difference today. And so we're going to start off with, you started as a 911 call taker, and not as someone who always planned to lead, but as someone on the phone taking the calls. What do you remember about that first version of yourself in that headset, and what did she understand about this work that leaders above her did not?
When I started in 911 so many years ago, it was just different for me. I didn't understand budget. I didn't understand metrics. I didn't really understand, updated technology. All I knew is that I was hired to do a job to help the public. I was hired to do a job where someone was calling 911 for help, and it was up to me and the decisions that I made in order to ensure that that happened. And so early on, like I said, I didn't understand budget. I had no idea what that conversation was. I didn't understand when staffing was an issue or the phones would ring and we didn't have the people to answer the phones. That was so early on. And I smile because it's like the things that I know now and the why behind what we do, it matters so much. And early on, I was never explained the why. You would just get here 10 minutes early, you log in, you take your calls, you get the addresses right, and you process and you go home. And that's what it was for me early on, just really understanding about what management looked for, metrics. I didn't care about metrics. I cared about answering 911 calls, right? And it's just, that was funny because it's like the metrics matter so much now, on both sides of it, as far as being in a center and sitting in that seat, and then being a vendor that's actually helping to accomplish those metrics. And then, the true understanding, the toll that it took on us, right? Leadership never really understood what that truly was. They would one of my earlier centers, they would ensure that we would have tomato pies. They weren't pizzas. They were tomato pies. Okay. A lot of people probably don't know what a tomato pie is, but it's a big deal on the East Coast in Pennsylvania, right?
Right.
We saw a lot of those to try to help with some of the stressors of the incidents that we handled, big stressors of what we were experiencing. And then lastly, you know, that policy piece. It was policy, 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 policy. But being a call taker and being in certain situations and incidents, policy sometimes there were so many gray areas, but you had to be resilient enough in order to handle these incidents and still follow procedure, but knowing how to adapt, right? And so the one thing that me as an early on call taker, what I promised myself, because I experienced a lot, I promised myself that person that I would keep in mind what we did as call takers in that seat as I made my way up through the leadership trail. And I never forgot it.
Yes.
And I think that has grounded me in this career.
Yeah, great take, TP. There's a couple of great nuggets, and I'll try to double back on those. One, you talk about policy, and we know that there's some things or times where policy breaks down and technology breaks down, and your training just takes over, kind of that muscle memory or kind of reaction in certain environments. And so if you policy it too much, you don't allow your people to really grow and use their instincts in certain situations. So that was a great point. Another thing that I'm trying to make sure that I continue to do in my own dispatch center is to understand that the environment was different or is different than when I was in the chair. 911 leaders talk about when they were in the chair and how it was. And I often say it's just a lot different now. You did mention a little bit about mentorship as well. Before we started recording, you talked a little bit about Karima Holmes, and she's with Carmine right now, and what she meant to your career and that influence. And so that was interesting. So I think being you are kind of lucky, and I'm trying to influence other leaders to make sure that they pull people in the room as well. You eventually became the Chief of Professional Standards and the Chief of Staff at DC's Office of Unified Communications, one of the most publicly scrutinized 911 centers in the country. It has faced real political pressure, media attention, and community criticism. What did operating in that type of environment teach you about the difference between appearing to improve versus actually improving?
So working in DC was so different than any other government entity that I've ever worked for. I'm going to phrase it as being in an aquarium, right? You're the fish in the aquarium, the beautiful, beautiful sights that we see when we go to different aquariums, and you have all these people taking pictures and they're watching and they're listening. That's exactly how it felt to be in DC, because there were a lot of political things that really had an effect on operational pieces within the 911 center, media, the city council, the community. These are things that everyone deals with, but in DC, it was just at a larger scale. And so,
Right.
in which I did my research, but you can do all the research you want. But once you get in the seat and you're working amongst this, it is so different. And so
Right.
operating in that environment, what did it teach me about the difference between appearing to improve and actually improving? Oh, it was a big deal. And for someone
Right.
who came into the agency over training, oh my gosh, it was not a game. I had a duty to make sure that I did everything that I could to implement so many different things in order to help our telecommunicators, but also make sure that we were shining bright with the public, with the council's office. Early on, I had that experience working with my director, Heather McGaffin, and I remember going to one of our council hearings, and I remember at that council hearing, they talked about the monies that we had as far as hiring and how we weren't hiring fast enough, and that, we need to do something. And I took it personal because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I need to make sure I need to help with this, right? And so just understanding the brevity of that and just being a part of that, and just really, really having an understanding on when politics of sometimes it's at the cost of the people, It's not the operations, it's the people, because, in 911, sometimes the end users, they don't understand. They're just told to do. You got to do this and you got to do it this way. You come in next day or 2
Right.
days later with a new procedure, a new operational piece. Being in DC taught me that communication was key, transparency was key. In order to get your folks to buy in, you had to have those two things. Even though, the city council wanted us to do something different, or we had to do it this way. No matter what we did, no matter what I did, whatever my team did, we had to lead with honest communication.
Right.
And we
Right.
really did what it took behind the scenes. And not, the public doesn't know. They don't know. They just, they're doing training. Yes, we're doing training. We're doing classroom training. We're doing refresher training. We're doing um, back to work training. But these are the little things that the public couldn't see. So someone who was in that aquarium, I knew the deal, but it was hard because I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't speak about it because you would see, oh, they didn't do this or they, and I'm just like, that's not true. That's not correct. I'm a part of that
Right.
because I was a part of it. So it was very different as it related to actually appearing to improve and actually improving. We actually, but again, the public didn't have that opportunity to understand what was happening in the backsides. But I made sure that the people weren't a piece lost in that process. That's what I was able to do.
Yeah. All of the experience that you got at UC is going to be such a value add at Govworx because you're going into climates to where you're implementing, AI quality assurance and, it's a new thing. And so that trust factor of having to communicate what it is, how it will work, you understand how leaders are or what the scrutiny they're facing at the local level in implementing something new like Govworx. So I'm sure Govworx is happy to have that experience on board. I will talk a little bit about, you mentioned communication with the public. And that's one of the things that I'm encouraging that leaders actually include the public in the implementation process as well. So you made me think of that in your take. There is a version of the practitioner turned vendor role that the industry is skeptical of, the person who becomes a talking point for the sales team, a credible person on the slide deck. How do you make sure that this is not what you are? And honestly, how would you even know that that's happened?
Well, because I think I have a large voice in the industry because I can speak to each piece of it. And when I have these conversations now with people, the one thing that I'm able to say is that I was never a director and I did not see myself wanting to go in that direction. I wanted to help in a way where I was still able to support the mission. And I knew that once I left 911, however I did it and what I did, I had to be very careful because the one thing in the vendor world, what I will say is that in agencies, we don't trust vendors. I'm speaking from the chief of staff side. We don't trust the vendors. It's funny because I'm going to tell you, it's like a game for us. We
Right.
sit and we'll schedule 5, 6, 7 demos, whatever product we're looking for, and we're sitting there on the phone and taking notes. And sometimes I'm taking notes as far as like, I can't believe he just said that. Or I can't believe
Right.
they don't know what this means. Or how are they
Right.
able to get on this call and they can't relate to what I'm doing, what our telecommunicators are doing. So those are the types of notes that I'm taking, when it was time
Right.
for that vendor piece. And so remembering that was a big deal because I'm like, oh my gosh, I am going into the vendor space. And
Right.
this is a big deal because I know I was the one, and so, skepticism is 100% justified in this, right? Everyone should be skeptical. But the main thing is that my experience, it spoke for itself. When we get on these calls with some of the agencies that we're looking to try to bring on board, the conversations are very candid. And I try to make sure that I'm able to speak the language. When you're not able to speak the language, you're not respected. It's unfortunate. I'm hoping that when someone hears this podcast, they're going to say, oh, that's a good resource for some of our vendors, right?
Right. Right.
And so I try to make sure that I'm honest about focusing on where I spend my time and how I use my voice within Govworx as it relates to product influence, right? I'm not on any project teams, but I was just a part of one product. I'm not going to even say, no need to say, but I understood the importance of knowing a product and understanding all the backside pieces of the product, right? And so when I'm able to speak to it, I know both sides. It comes together. I protect the truth over the sale. Even though I'm not a salesperson, I think because I'm uniquely involved in some of the processes, I'm able to, I know what we're doing. We're not just out here selling a product just to get you on. We're not, the ones that are, oh, come on board, and then you see an onboarding team and then they're gone. Like some of the other vendors that I have worked with in the past,
Right.
I remember that. I remember getting the product. We got this big invoice, you pay the invoice, they have a couple meetings, product is delivered, and you don't
Then
have
it's
a
gone.
customer success manager. I'm like, what?
Yep.
And so also
Yep.
just making sure the last piece, staying tethered to the operational piece of 911. I have so many connections in 911 in many different places across the country. I stay connected, and I don't just and this is another thing as a vendor now. I'm not staying connected with just vendors. I'm staying connected with the people that actually do the work. I want to still talk to you. I want to see how you're doing. Is there something that I can do in my capacity at Govworx? And no, I'm not trying to sway you. I think that I'm doing a good job making sure that I am bridging that gap the right way. Because again, going into this vendor space, it wasn't an easy decision. It was just like, oh my gosh, I'm nervous. I was grounded in government for a long time. It was different. But I can tell you it's probably one of the better decisions that I've made professionally, and I'm super excited to be a part of this mission.
Yeah, I could tell you where that question came from. Some vendors have been criticized by not having people that are experienced in the public safety space on their staff. And then some vendors are compensating for that by doing so. And then they're still getting scrutinized because, oh, that person's just a face. And so what I wanted to let our listeners know is a TP is not just a face. The real deal, have worked in the center for years, sat in the chair, knows what it is to struggle in a dispatch center and to overcome those struggles. At some point, you decided to leave the agency world and join Govworx. You had built something real inside of DCOUC. What was the moment or the accumulation of moments that made you think the most impactful thing you could do was on the vendor side?
That's a great question, because probably about 3 years in, I started thinking, I'm like, okay, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I really need to think about what's going to be the next step. And so I kept hearing a consulting. And I'm just like, would that really, really give me what I'm looking for? And so
Right.
when I left DC 911 at the end of my career, because I was there for about 4 years, I felt like a piece of my 911 heart, I left it there, right? It was rough because I left the people, I left all the things that were put in place, and I just left a place where I saw them grow, right? And it was hard. It wasn't like I was so excited. I was excited to have a new opportunity, but
Right.
I actually had that empathy, that how I lead now, that empathy actually, it got to me. I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Like, I'm really closing this chapter. And so because of that, and knowing that I had did this and spent this time, I said, going to GovWorks, I think this makes sense. And I'm going to tell you why. And I will stand on this story. I will stand on this story. So when I was actually looking for a solution for my director, she wanted 100% quality assurance in DC. And at the time, there were some, the different companies doing it. And I think I did about 5 or 6 demos. GovWorks was the last demo. Met with the, CEO, Scott McDonald, and Matt Wazell. He was one of our earlier sales executives. And I'll never forget that call, because
Yeah.
everything he said in that call, it wasn't about it wasn't about the product. It was about the mission driven energy that they had for public safety, right? And he just kept
Right.
saying, we understand the mission. And so when I saw that, I said, this is had blown away. I had never experienced anything like that in the vendor space, And so then we got the product, and they were just, GovWorks held our hand from beginning all the way through the end.
Right.
And so it was mind blowing. I was very, very impressed. And so as we went on with the product and I just saw how they supported us, it made a world of a difference. And so, but then we talk about the product, right? And I saw what it did for the center. I said, this is it. This is the game changer. This is something that
Right.
we need. This is something that has
Right.
been unheard of. This is for someone who has created a quality assurance program in 2 agencies, not just one, but 2 agencies, and knowing all the work behind it. And I was impressed. And I said, you know what? They're a part of the mission. I want to be a part of GovWorks because I want to help. I want to help with this mission. I'm not an engineer. I'm not in, I'm not into computers and things like that. but I understand the other side of it. And so, I realized that Govworx, they were into transforming 911 inside agencies, not for the profit, but for our telecommunicators. And so it just made sense. Why not join that effort where they're helping telecommunicators, leading with that first? Because again, vendors will lead with the money piece and, oh, you get this and it's because we have this, that, and the other. That wasn't for me. I can say GovWorks's mission as far as helping our first responders, helping the telecommunicator, the platform, that's what it does. And that's why I'm here.
Right. You mentioned previously trust of vendors, and I thought that was an interesting take because you're right. I mean, and you were brave to say it. There's a lot of leaders out there that don't trust any vendor. And one of the reasons is vendors will come in and talk about features and functionality and ROI right from the jump without asking about the issues and challenges in the dispatch center, or doing a strong discovery and then tailoring the conversation to what the needs of the leadership inside of the dispatch center. And so I wanted to double back on that just to let vendors know that approach is critical. Again, it's great when you have a good product and you want to talk about what it does, but be sure when you're walking in the public safety space to get the issues and challenges right from the horse's mouth. Another thing you mentioned was you talked about the 100% of QA. You had a director that wanted 100% of QA, and that's a discussion that's out there right now. I'm on the 100% of QA camp. Some are not. So let's veer a little bit and talk about that. Why do you think it's important to get 100% of QA done inside of the dispatch center?
Well, 100%, man. I remember when we could do just a quarter of a percent. In PA, they were mandated to do a certain amount. Some agencies didn't have quality assurance. I mentioned one other agency I did implement, but it was important. It's important for 100%. And a lot of people, the first thing they probably think of is performance and compliance. That's not what it is. We have to remember that when we talk about 100 quality assurance on our 911 calls, we're able to get the information needed in order to tell the stories that we're looking to read.
Yes.
What that means is that, okay, you're going to find the calls where they're not performing well. But what about the calls where they are performing well and they need to be acknowledged, right? Because we haven't been able to do that well, right? It's always been kind of reactive. Someone, a community member or someone might write an email and this call was handled. And then you go and pull it in and say, oh, wow. So that is one piece. But 100% quality assurance, it's giving us a way to find the needles in the haystack. Let's talk about wellness. I was just telling a wellness coordinator the other day, with the Comms Coach platform, you're able to pull the data that you need in order to find out how a person is doing with their psychological safety, right? And the platform, it allows you to see how many calls, how many calls a telecommunicator has taken, what types of calls. When did they take the calls? What time of day or, what day? Who was the supervisor that handled that incident, right?
Right.
Those are the things that we have not been able to analyze because we didn't have the tools, because we didn't have what in place. We only had what we had, right? Whether it was a system, whether it was an Excel sheet and you created a process in which all of those things are great because they got us to here. But now we're here.
Right.
And doing 100% QA, again, forget the gotcha QA. That's not what this is about. This is about being able to look at things in a wider spectrum where you can actually see the stories that you're trying to read. It's not just what you're trying to read. And so as it relates to directors and executive leadership, again, we've used ECAT reports to kind of, do, let's look ahead. But with CommScope, you can look at the things as far as how many QAs did you do here during this time period. That kind of can help you with staffing, or it can help you with how you're going to place people and where you're going to place them. So 100% quality assurance was super important because, again, it was helping us to look past the compliance piece because we know that we have to do that anyway. But let's work on the things that are going to help our people. Wellness, and that psychological safety. That's the one thing that I stand on, and which I know the platform has been awesome to help us do.
I could do an entire episode on this. There's just a variety of things that I could do with 100% of data. One is there's a lot of agencies out there that don't have a standard setting body that's helping support their protocol. And so, how do you know the questions that you're asking are the right questions? What if your emergency dispatchers are having to clarify questions a lot because citizens aren't understanding the question that's written? It's just a plethora of information that you start to get as far as how to operationalize your organization when you have more data at your fingertips. So I love what Govworx is doing in that arena. CommCoach uses AI to elevate and coach 911 telecommunicators. You spent years on the other side of that, being evaluated, building evaluation systems, managing people who were evaluated. What did Govworx get right about that process that most quality assurance approaches in 911 get wrong?
So the one thing that I know that they got right, the number one thing, like I kind of mentioned that gotcha QA, Comms Coach has looked at it as a way to move from gotcha to growth. And so Comms Coach is built to be a coach. Comms Coach is built to be support, for a job that we're already doing, right? Because bringing in an AI, it's able to help evaluate calls objectively instead of having some of those subjective pieces that we have without using AI. You're not really finding what you need in 1 to 3% of calls being evaluated. With 100%, you can actually get solid information as to your operational piece. And then, like you just mentioned, with that, contextualizing stress and tone. For instance, traditional QA forms, did they do this or did they ask this question, yes or no?
Right.
However, with Comms Coach, it gives you an entire explanation as to why or what was or what wasn't. And so
Right.
just giving that information in the depth of information that it does provide, it has totally changed the quality assurance piece because again, Govworx, like I said, they understood that we have to move away from you didn't do this or you did this and we need to do it this way. No, with Comms Coach and with all of the different things that we have in the platform, again, it's a coaching system, right? You're able to see where your people are performing or not performing. You can assign them coaching activities, whether it's micro learning or simulations. Where have they done that? I mean, I've been in this, I don't know how long you've been in this, Ivan, but for me, for 24 years, I've never seen anything like it. I had the trainer behind
Right.
me, right? I go through a quality assurance session. The supervisor talks it out and we practice. That's not really giving me what I need as far as, showing that I understand, right? And I can actually perform. But now what Comms Coach offers, you're able to actually practice it in almost a real life environment, giving you those
Right.
same effects. So we're getting it right and we're still getting it right because, we have a host of different products that we're still, moving towards. But yeah, that's where they're getting it right.
Yeah, I've been in 30 years now. One of the things we've always struggled with is time to get the feedback back to emergency dispatchers. So if you could get it back within 72 hours, you're doing great, right? If you could get it back within 2 weeks, you're doing great. Sometimes in agencies, it's a couple of months before that feedback is produced, let's be honest. And so for me to be at a console and about 12 minutes after taking a call, it pops up and I can actually see exactly how I fared. It brings something different to the table to where people can get better immediately and look at the platform on a call that they've just taken. I mean, that's just phenomenal. When a 911 center signs on with Govworx and the implementation begins, what is the single most common thing that goes wrong in the first 90 days? And how much of it is predictable before it happens?
So when you say what goes wrong in the first 90 days, I am, of course I'm biased because, we're Govworx, so we're going to get it right, right? But in the 90 days, I want you to think about this. Most common thing that I think goes wrong is the trust shock from the supervisory layer. Supervisors, when they hear that new technology is coming, they don't have the tools to have that confidence to ensure that they lead their people, right? And when I
Right.
say that, it's not that we do a bad job in ensuring that they are prepared. It's they have to get that trust. They have to get that buy-in. Just like our people, we want them, our telecommunicators, we want them to get the buy-in. The supervisors
Right.
have to buy in as well because they're going to be the ones that are helping to lead the efforts of that new technology. And
Right.
so we have to ensure that when we are implementing new technology, you have to equip the team for that change management piece, right? Whatever that looks like, if they don't feel confident, if they don't trust, if they don't feel safe, that language or that communication is going to hit the floor, or hit the call taker that they're friends with or whatever. And now the call taker is going to tell the next person and the next person. And you know how that goes. So
Right.
it's so important that you equip your supervisors. And so I'll talk about last week I was in a center and they were about to deploy. They were about to go live. And I remember I was, given a tour of the center and they walked me into the supervisor's office and everybody was welcoming. And, based on the meeting that we had and the reason for me being there at the center, we were talking about the change management and making sure that the supervisors had the tools and trying to give them just different examples if this happened or whatever. And the one thing that I was able to stop and do right then in that moment, I think it was 4 supervisors. I said, you guys, I know that you guys are going to be going live with Comms Coach soon. What I want you to remember is that you are supported. We're here to support you. You guys are going to be the biggest factor in ensuring that this system works the way that it's supposed to, right? How you
Right.
report back to your project manager, what you don't understand, we have to ensure that they have the knowledge to understand. And so I sat there and I gave them this talk and I'm getting them fired up. And the one lady, she was just like, my gosh, she said, I wish I would have videotaped this because I feel empowered right now because of what you said. And so
Right.
that's what we have to remember in any implementation. Your supervisors are going to either make it or break it. I put something on LinkedIn that said the supervisors are the make it or break it of the floor. That's so true,
Yep.
right? But they are the make it or break it of technology. If they don't
Yes.
understand, if they're not educated, if they don't know the why, that's how the negative messaging begins. So we have to do a better job to put our supervisors in a place where they can actually feel more supported in these technology implementations. A part of this AI process, we need you. So I would say that trust piece is going to be the trust shock in that first 90 days.
I'm going to go a little bit further with that. That take is phenomenal, and you said a lot of great things there. Well, there's a statistic out there that says that 80% of technology implementations fail. Difference between launching or failing to meet the objectives that the particular buyer intended. And so there's 2 sides. One side, we suffer from a project management perspective at the agency level. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is really train up our folks inside on very good project management, because that supervisor piece that you just mentioned, if there's good project management, that's already infused in the implementation process. So that's one side. And then on the other side, there's a lot of agencies out there that just can't afford good project management or a project manager. And so coming from the vendor side, making sure that their project managers understand the concept of what you just said. When it comes to the project management side, do I even know enough to get this implementation across the bow and make sure that there's buy-in all the way down to the dispatcher level where it's most important? And so again, all of that could be factored into the implementation process, and it comes back to the project plan itself. So good stuff with what you just mentioned. Quality assurance in 911 has historically been done badly, inconsistently, punitively, and with real bias. You have been on record saying QA should not be about compliance. It should be about protection. What does it actually take to shift a 911 center's culture around evaluation, not just installing a new platform, but changing how supervisors and dispatchers relate to the feedback process?
It's a culture piece, right? When we talk about culture, we talk about morale. That affects culture. Ooh, I can remember early on when it was time to get QAs done, I would be like, oh God, it's my turn. I got to go into the office and I got to sit there and, hear what I did, and then, it was just, I was nervous. I just knew I was nervous. It was never a good feeling. And so knowing how I felt, I said, what can I do in a space that, I have an effect on quality assurance? What can I do to try to change that? And so the number one thing was culture. I remember early on, quality assurance wasn't perfect at the agency that I worked in. I'm not going to say which agency. It wasn't perfect. You could never get 100% on an evaluation because the way that the form was built, it was just built inaccurately. And no matter how well the call taker did, they could never get 100%. So when I got in and I started meeting with people, and the attitude was just like, oh, it's a joke. It's just not right. And I started analyzing and looking at things. And I said, you know what? I said, I could see why. I could see why the
Right.
attitudes are the way that they are. I can see why people look at quality assurance the way that they do. But we
Right.
have the ability to change how you get that message across. There's so many ways to do it. An example, one of the ways that I did, once I was able to get into one particular agency and I was able to change the entire quality assurance process, the first thing that I said, the people need to know how they're being evaluated and why. And I decided to share the evaluation criteria. That was the first part, being honest of the process. We weren't trying to trip anyone up. That's not what this was. We wanted to ensure that everyone knew exactly how they were being evaluated. Others on this podcast listening may not think that that was a big deal, but it was a big deal. Being transparent with the evaluation process. When the members knew exactly what to expect, that changed the approach, number one. Number two, was making sure that they understood that quality assurance was not just about compliance, it was about protection, right? Ensuring that they knew that a process was put in place to protect them from unfair scrutiny, burnout, and protect from litigation. When they understood that, they were able to receive better. Now, when it came to the feedback process, we still had some subjectivity there, but we worked on it. Training the quality assurance team and training the training team on the understanding of when you document what subjectivity looks like. What does objective writing look like? Making sure that they understood the process. And so then the last thing was, let's identify where we're getting it right. We always, we know what we're doing when we get it wrong. We know, we have the quality improvement session, you have the training. We have that down pat. Let's work on a place where we can, when we have someone walk in an office and we do feedback with them, praise them, praise them, let them know you did a great job. So as it relates to, and I'm just going to tie this back in, you cannot buy culture change, with a quality assurance process. You have to, again, get the buy-in, but there's ways to get the buy-in. And you are ensuring that they understand, ensuring that the end user that's being affected, they understand all of the pieces of the why. That's where you're going to get the buy-in. And that's where, you're going to see a culture shift. I saw the culture shift right in front of my face in 4 years. I saw the culture shift. And it was positive because of the things that we did was positive for the process.
This is another one of those that we could do an entire session on. You mentioned providing the standards of how they would be reviewed. When I was implementing protocols, that was just table stakes to the implementation. Everyone had to have a copy of the standards. Some would only say that the people that are certified in quality assurance should have that copy, but no, everyone should know. And so I agree with you 100% on that. The other thing is the culture of your quality assurance team is huge as well. I've been a part of conversations where people were debating about things, and I had to say, let's stop, because if you're debating about things in here and you have opposed opinions, then how someone that have to make this decisions in 6 seconds or 12 seconds, how are we expecting them to get it right? Let's get the information. Some of this might be a change in the protocol. Some of this might be a change in the standard that's needed, but we need to get another ruling on this and get back and then give our people on the floor the benefit of the doubt. And so you launched Level Up with Tipi, a monthly vlog series for 911 leaders that is explicitly not a product demo. It's a conversation about performance, wellness, and leadership. Why does Govworx invest in something that does not directly sell the platform?
Well, it's a part of our mission. Because again, yes, we are a vendor and we are product focused, but our mission is to ensure that our public knows that the telecommunicator is our first priority. And so what they do, how they do it, how we can support, that's a priority for us. And so it just made sense for me to create a place to have those conversations outside of a product world, but also, really, really communicate to the public that we are here to support, and it was so awesome when Scott, told me, he said, I want you to do this. I said, are you serious? Like, I get to have conversations with people about things, about topics, and so that was amazing for me. I think that's what really sold me once I got into the job, being able to have candid conversations, because the messaging was important to me. There's other companies out there or whatever, but the messaging was important. And so with the Level Up series, We're not talking about sales. We're talking about the hard topics that are affecting our people, affecting our telecommunicators. I'm looking forward to doing a 3-part wellness series that's actually, I just finished it up today, that's coming out because we want our telecommunicators to understand and know that, yes, Govworx, we're here with Comms Coach, but we're here and we understand what you guys are going through and we're here to support in any way that we can. And so the level of vlog series, like I said, an extension to what we do, but it is a voice. It's a voice from how we truly feel about our mission. And it's a way to get it out there where you don't have to hear about technology. You can actually hear candid conversations from people who are doing the work in the industry or in the field. And that's what it was all about.
TP, to close the show out today, I have a question. I'm going to put myself in the role of a new 911 director coming into a dispatch center, and they've taken on a system that doesn't have a QA program in place. They're not providing feedback. What kind of advice would you give them as to where they can start? What should they do? And then what do you have coming out with Govworx that our listeners should be aware of?
So as a new director, the one thing that I can say is kind of like the approach that I took when I actually looked for this solution. Really understand the need. Write those questions down, the ones that you're looking to accomplish in that conversation. That was the first thing, right? What's going to be the feedback time? How soon do you need this information? Who are you dealing with as far as who's looking at this information? And so looking at those questions. And the other thing I'm going to say is the industry knowledge, vendors with industry knowledge and the understanding of the process. When a vendor is unable to speak to a process, it just makes you question, do they really understand the needs that we have? And so looking at vendors who understand the operational process, because that's what's going to matter the most. And then just overall understanding of, have you sat in the seat before? I've spoken to directors that have never sat in the seat and they have a hard time in their profession. But those are going to be the 3 things that I would say. And I would say for Govworx right now, one of the top things that I think that we have right now, it's promote. I'm super excited about that because I actually had the opportunity to be a part of that team. So we have our hire platform. As an extension to the hire platform, we have now added on a promote assessment for those looking to go into 911 supervision or leadership. It is an assessment specifically designed based on industry standards to measure the 6 competencies: culture, team, leadership, and looking at toxicity. And so I know that we have not had a way to really get those measurements previously for supervisors as they're, trying to go into a promotional state. I know I did not have anything like that, but we have built something, I think, that's going to be a game changer, as we do now with everything else, game changer. I think it's going to be a game changer for those that are looking to promote their staff or bring someone into an agency to see if they have the basic understanding of the call standards, right? See if they have the understanding of how to have a conversation, right? We're talking about simulated hard conversations, SOP understanding, situational reports. So with all of those different things, it's about a 3-hour assessment. But again, I think I'm very excited for it. And so, yes, the promote assessment.
So let me get this right. So one of the modules inside of promote, the emergency dispatcher is actually an AI bot, and the supervisor can talk directly to it and get correspondence based on certain situations that supervisors would encounter. Is that what it is?
My goodness. Yes, that's correct. Let's just say an employee, they did not follow the procedure for calling out. So now the supervisor has to have a conversation with them on a coaching conversation. We haven't had that before.
No.
We've never had that before. So now you're gonna use AI to have a conversation with an employee, and you as a supervisor, you have to provide coaching to that person. Touching on policy and procedure, touching on follow-up, touching on in that moment, reiterations, all of the things that supervisors have to do now, the 6 competencies: decisive operational command, composure and cognitive resilience, team stewardship and culture leadership, integrity and ethical decision-making, operational and procedural mastery, and leadership and organizational influence. And so again, we're super excited.
Tipi Brookens, everyone, Chief of Public Safety Engagement with Govworx. someone that has sat in the seat, just a phenomenal expert in the space. And TP, I'm just so excited for what all you'll do in 911 public safety with Govworx, and looking forward to talking to you again. There's just so much I'd like to talk to you about as we move forward in the space together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ivan, for having me. This was an awesome pleasure. And yes, you're doing amazing things with this podcast. So it's going to help someone. Thank you.